Hello, everyone. I'm Esther Vida, and welcome to another edition of Politics That's Sexy. I'm joined by Tom Farmer, former executive producer with CNN. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Esther. Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing great. I'm so ready for spring and ready to talk about lots of headlines. We will talk about possible shift of control of the internet. Also, UC Berkeley gives a warm welcome to Senator Rand Paul, but we begin with the tit for tat in the Ukraine. It seems like every day, Tom, we have one move by Putin, one move by Obama. This week, we have more sanctions against some companies issued by an executive order by President Barack Obama. And Putin retaliates by putting a bipartisan list of lawmakers on a sanction list. At least he's fair that way, right, Tom?
Well, this is the hottest list in Washington. It's a mark of shame if you're not on the list, and I'm sure it'll screw up John Boehner and John McCain's vacation plans so they can't go to Moscow anymore, and a few other folks are on there. But honestly, this is pretty meaningless, isn't it?
It is meaningless, and it just keeps going back and forth. And we've talked about sanctions before. There's also been talk about, quote, going in. And you've raised some questions about what does going in mean. President Obama said there's no way he'll do it. Do you think that empowers Putin?
Well, I think that Putin has taken the measure of U.S. will to intervene, and he understands the U.S. is in kind of a retrenchment phase, an isolationist phase, and that's part of the reason he's placed this bet. But to your question about going in, because to the legions watching this thing, we had this email exchange earlier today where Esther said, we're going to talk about going in. I said, well, what does that mean exactly? When these kinds of things occur, and it went on with Syria, it went on with Egypt to some extent, all through the Arab Spring, there is always a certain sector of the American public that says we should go in. Which invariably means some military thing. And they're not so clear in what that is exactly, but we should go in and we should do something. But when you start thinking about how exactly you'd go in and whose kids you'd put in there and what you would do when you'd get there and how you would get out again, the premise gets a lot more difficult to deal with. There's no argument under international law for, quote, going into the Crimea and doing what? Chasing out the Russians after 93% of the population apparently voted they want them there? But the bigger question is, how would you frame such an intervention, which would be so against the grain with the American public right now anyway, it'd be politically impracticable. But is it militarily or diplomatically practicable? The answer is no. What would you do about this once you hit the beach? What would you blow up first? And if you chased him out, what would you replace him with? It's not in the realm of feasibility. I appreciate some people think we should be doing more, but I can't imagine what more we could possibly do.
And I think you brought up a good point earlier, Tom, in those emails that said, how do we measure success? Because when you look at places like Iraq and Afghanistan, we stay for a certain time and look at it. It's gone, turmoil has returned to both areas. So is our strategy of going in good and beneficial in the end anyway?
Colin Powell used to have the Powell Doctrine, which essentially says if you're going to go in, you better know how you're going to get out. Don't walk into a room without looking for the exit sign. And we obviously had no clear idea of how we were going to get out of Iraq or Afghanistan, and that now colors our attitude towards any intervention opportunity, I think. But Powell's basically right. You got to have goals. You got to know when you've won. We don't have any of those things in the wars we've been waging now for 13 or so years. And we wouldn't have such a thing in Ukraine and Central Asia if this were to blow up that way.
We've talked about this issue before of whether you think this is just another step in Putin's view of wanting to return to the old Soviet era. He has Georgia. He's doing it to Crimea. After hearing from him a few times and him saying no one has to fear that they're not going to go, Putin's not going to go and take over any more land. Do you believe him, or do you think this is, again, what we discussed before, just another step in getting the old Soviet regime back?
Well, I think both are true. I think he absolutely wants to reconstitute a sort of sphere of influence based around an alternative to what he regards as decadent Western liberalism. He wants a more autocratic, efficient alternative out there. And I think Crimea is kind of an adventure. It's sort of poking us with a hat pin to see if we'll react. But I don't think it means he's going to roll through the rest of Ukraine tomorrow and into Poland the week after that, and so on and so forth, because Putin is, while he regards the dissolution of the Soviet Union as a tragedy, he is still sensitive to world opinion. The Sochi Olympics are in pursuit of global approval. If he didn't care what the rest of the world thought, he wouldn't have had all those dancing bears out there. So there's clearly a measure being taken of how much the West and the EU will do to intervene. I don't think he thinks the U.S. will do much, correctly so, but I don't think he's going to engage in sort of westward expansion and try to go marching through Paris either. It's just not going to happen. It's not politically practicable, and he is acutely sensitive to what the world thinks of him, more than what Obama thinks of him, I think.
Do you think, Tom, that this is the new Cold War, if we want to call that? Can this be compared to the Cold War? It feels like the chess moves are coming back.
Well, in a very small kind of spring training way, I guess, where it doesn't really count and you get to go out and throw some pitches. But it's not really comparable to the Cold War, where you had two competing ideologies, both mortally terrified of the other, and the specter of global nuclear war hanging over all of us for decades, and a sense that every little chess move meant volumes. That's why we got mired in Vietnam. That's why we went berserk when the Russians went into Afghanistan. This is not that story. We don't have a giant competition for world opinion. And aside from the Ukrainian energy reserves being important to Russia and to some extent Europe, it's not a hugely important crossroads. When my wife and I were raising our kid, and our kid pitched a tantrum over some very small thing, and the tendency is to smack him down, my wife would always say, look, is this the hill you want to die on? Mm-hmm. Is this the small issue you want to make a huge discussion over and blow up the whole weekend? And the answer generally is no. You gotta pick the hills you're going to die on with great care. And this is not it. So this is not a Cold War 2.0. This is a regional conflict which will probably simmer down of its own accord unless there's some unforeseen destabilizing factor, like a cyber attack or something.
Okay, well, before we go there, I want to ask you, Tom, having said that, do you think this situation in the Crimea will affect our relationship with Putin, with Iran, with some of the other issues that there needs to be some collaboration in, Syria? Do you think there'll be some kind of a effect on those relationships?
Well, our relationship with Putin couldn't be worse. There's going to be the ability to work together on side issues, even while we have angry discussions over this. We have this with all our all the principal powers in the world. We have disagreements, and then we have areas for cooperation. But we have a strong mutual interest, we and Russia, in preventing Iranian nuclear capability. We have a strong interest in getting a handle on destabilizing extra-national forces like Al-Qaeda. We have plenty that unites us, even though we're fighting over this. We just need a president who can tell the difference.